Welcome to the July 9th, 2014 meeting, work session of Richmond Community Schools Board of School Trustees. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now we are ready for our statement of vision.
Richmond Community Schools, a community nurturing mind, body, and spirit to prepare students for lives of choice, purpose, and service.
And our mission. Thank you, Kelly.
Richmond Community Schools guides students on pathways of learning to a future of limitless possibilities.
Thank you, Susie. And now we're ready for our showcase video.
And I will turn over the introduction of the showcase video to Mr. Tidrow.
Well, thank you. Last month we talked about part of the operations department focusing on technology. This month we'll focus on the other pieces of the operations department, and we're going to begin with this meeting tonight focusing on the food services department, and that's what our video is going to be about. So the first part of the video, the person talking will be focusing on the summer feeding program. So I just wanted to key in on that.
The Richmond, Hibbert, Crestdale, Boys and Girls Club, the Parks Department, and Y-Care. We have at least 7 that's packing every day. We have one that has to cut all the meat. So there's usually anywhere from 7 or 8 in there every day doing the packing, the sending out to the Hibbert, to Crestdale, which is the elementary, summer school. So, but that's all we have. And then plus our 2 drivers. We have 2 drivers that deliver like to the parks and Boys and Girls Club. And then when they have the pool delivery, the kids can't wait for that truck. They see that white truck pull in and it's the lunch man. So they're so awesome. So they definitely, they know. They will stand and wait for that truck to come in. And Cliff gets a kick out of them, so it's good. It's good. It's an awesome program. I'm telling you.
We go by our government regulations and the foods that we bid, and we just make sure that we meet the ½ cup of legumes and the ½ cup of dark green vegetable and the ¾ cup of red or orange vegetable and the sodium coming up this year. And it's just, we have to mix and match and move things around until it all works. We've done samplings here at the high school. We proposed doing it at the intermediate schools, but short staff days, we were just never able to make that happen. The total budget is $3,405,580, and that's for maintenance equipment, food supplies, truck, our employees, and benefits. Absolutely wonderful group of people, will go the extra mile. They're like me, we're worker bees. We're not front of the line, in front of the camera people. We just prefer to come in and we do our job to the best of our ability and then we go home. So, but they're wonderful people. Couldn't replace them. When the kids come in and they're having a bad day, and sometimes they take it out on the workers, and then the next morning I think they come in expecting the worker to hold a grudge. And that's our policy, is you never ever hold a grudge. It's every day is a new day. And the kids are kind of surprised when they're greeted the same way in a good manner, and then good relationships happen that way. We are a satellite system, which means our other schools do not have kitchens. They have modified kitchens, but not like we do here. And we send out bulk food to the middle or the intermediate schools, and they do the prep on site. We pack the meals for the elementary school, so all they do is actually just heat the food or keep it refrigerated.
That was really a great video. They're getting better and better each time. So.
Well, that was another one done by Jake Allen, the intern that's working with Misty's department. I think we need to have Jake in here, maybe in the next one. And
That was just
So,
awesome. It really was.
when you look at that, notice the different camera angles. Dr. Parker pointed that out. An amateur, we would probably just have a head-on straight view, but he takes those nice angles. And that's probably part of what he's learned from Mr. Russell's class over at the high school with the radio and TV class. But those are good. And today they were out filming the next video, which will be at the end of the month with the maintenance and facilities department. So I'm interested to see the video of that. But our operations department comprises several areas, but I did want to touch on something to think about the food service department. It's probably the only department we have where 100% of the students enter that facility, the cafeteria at lunch. Maybe some kids eat in the classroom and so forth, but it's the only place in our district where 100% of those kids normally congregate. They don't usually do it every day in the gym class or the music class or whatever, but so every day Maggie's LaRue's department has to handle all those students, and they do it very effectively, and they love it, and you can see that when they talk about it and go about their business. But it's a very important part of our learning process. Kids have to be fed. I can't concentrate when I'm hungry, so I can't imagine a student going through being hungry. So that's a very important part of our process, learning process. Last time I brought the operations department organizational chart. We did a little bit of updating here, added some other items. I thought I'd go through this quickly, and then later in the board meeting we'll have a work session where we'll ask Mrs. LaRue to come up and give her annual report and also a hands-on feature for the work session tonight. But when we look at the operations, we have the food service area, we have technology, we have maintenance and facilities with Mr. Hamilton, and environmental services report to him in the summer mainly. Lynn Slifer is in charge of the other side of maintenance and facilities, the electrical and so forth. Mr. Slifer is also a building safety person. He's also the Wayne County safety specialist chairperson. And then on the lower left, we have a dotted line out to the student transit, the Sodrel company, for the transportation area that falls under the operations area. I'm going to drill down, and we'll look at food service people. As you can see, we have Maggie LaRue at the top. We also have on the top right is a section for the principals. The food service people in the buildings have a double master, if you want to say. They report to the building principal, but they also report to Maggie LaRue. And Maggie is in charge of getting subs, making sure people are employed and so forth. But they also report directly to that principal in the building. Mrs. Lisa Faught is the secretary that works directly with Ms. LaRue. And we saw the RHS kitchen manager, Sheila Elliott, in the video doing a great job. But we have each of the head cooks, the head checkers in each of the buildings highlighted here. Also on that top line to the right, we have Mr. Andy Abner. If you've been in the buildings, if you've been out, you've probably seen Mr. Abner delivering things, working in the stock room, and he does an excellent job for us. Take a few moments here. I believe we looked a little bit last time at our maintenance and facilities department. Again, we have John or Mr. Hamilton, Mr. Slifer as area managers, and I wanted to highlight each of the general maintenance people: Jeff Ingerman, John Robertson, John Rail, Kevin Wicks, Mike Yount, and Chris Dunham. Chris does a lot of the deliveries as well as a courier down there. So. You'll see them out doing facilities work. You'll see them doing carpentry work. You'll see them around doing the grounds. Under Mr. Slifer, we have Maria Ball, Mike Schubert, and Bobby Johnson, and they're in charge of the HVAC, the air conditioning, the heating, and general maintenance. With Mike does a lot of the electrical work for us, as well as Maria, and some of the minor plumbing work. And then in student transit with the transportation area, Mrs. Darengowski is the Director of Administration there. We also have Bill Thomas is our Director of Operations, or not ours, but Student Transit's. And supporting them, Mrs. Morrison, Darlene Morrison's is out there, Shannon Mullins, and then the mechanics helpers, and the drivers. And Suzanne, how many drivers?
We have 43 routes during
43
the year,
routes,
plus
okay.
a couple of
It's a busy time out there.
short routes, Yeah.
So, and this summer they did summer school transportation and other things. So I think I'll just leave it at that, and we will come back to the food service during the work session. Any questions that I can answer, I'd be happy to. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was the 2.01.
That was the joy, celebrating the joy of
Operation.
operations. The life of Rob Tidrow.
Doesn't involve surgery.
Are there any other board reflections or superintendent reflections in our celebration time?
I just might say that that group of folks doesn't exactly have a summer. I've seen them, I mean, obviously they're out at the bus garage, but they're all over the place working all year long. And so I think that is something worth stating, because I think sometimes people say, oh, school's out. There's a lot going on.
Right, and I think this is about the first year in a while that there hasn't been a lot of moving going on. And when that moving was going on, they couldn't take their vacations during the summer. And they do have buildings to get
All right,
ready, and
get
they're
ready.
working
A lot. And a shorter summer.
diligently. Yes.
It's a shorter summer. The moving hasn't taken place, but because it's a shorter summer, it is just as hectic in some ways.
You know, as I looked at the employees there, I know that Chris Dunham began working for Richmond Schools when he was in high school. So he's been here quite a while.
Has good history with us.
Yes, yes. And just went right into another job, I think, with us when he graduated from high school, or maybe it was the same job. I don't know, but anyway. Well, we appreciate all of those people. Sure. Okay, do we have anyone wishing to speak tonight? Any public commentary?
Don't think so, no.
Okay, if it would be okay with the board, I would like to suggest that we move the waiver of policy 77434 up, because we have someone that has made an effort to be here. And since it's pretty far down on the agenda, I thought it would be a courteous thing for us to do, since Kevin is here. And he might want to address us. So if it's okay with everyone, we'll do that. Okay.
This policy is, or I should say waiver of policy, is being recommended in response to some needs and in response to some issues that we have at the C.R. Richardson building. We discussed it at the last board meeting, and we opted to re-present it only with a sunset clause, which would enable us to implement the waiver, examine the results. If the results are positive, we could make this a permanent waiver. If they're not, we could let it die a natural death and not revisit the issue. This was a suggestion of Mr. Cross. He isn't here, is he? No. He couldn't be with us this evening, but this was a recommendation. We've also been working on some background information that would perhaps help the board make a decision. We've been looking at 3 different locations. If we were to create an area for people to smoke on the C.R. Richardson site. There are some places that would be better than others. There is no ideal space as they are. No ideal space. So what we were looking at would be the cost to create a space on the south side of the building. This would be near the entrance for the Excel Center, but it would entail constructing a wall of some kind, a barrier of some kind, and it would also entail perhaps moving the playground structures. We have a playground area out there, and we might want to relocate some of that playground area to a spot north, that would be west of the building, in an area where the preschool students come and go. Mr. Mays, have you had a chance, he and I have not had an opportunity to talk today. Have you had a chance to examine any of the estimated costs associated with such a move? And
yes, we have an estimated cost of around $20,000, and one reason why it's so high is because there's some specialized equipment that only an authorized person can move them. We can't, our staff can't move them because of liability.
You're talking about the playground equipment.
We would have to then create the ground, rework the ground, and we can do that. But in moving the equipment, so we looked at a $20,000 total project.
Does that include the construction of a barrier of some kind?
No, it does not. It also doesn't include, depending upon where we put it, there's a swale that carries the water off of the playground from 13th Street kind of northwest, and coming off of the track and football field, it heads towards the north, and we would have to relocate that swale because of the size of the, we have a, do you have a? I don't have it. Okay. An aerial of that, and the playground's pretty good size, and so it would take, we'd have to move that fence west of the building and still leave room for some parking for future usage of those 2 or 3 classrooms on the south side of the lower half of the building.
Well, in your view, is it even practical to move that playground?
Not very.
Okay. Okay.
I had a conversation today. Mr. Stidham called, and I think he talked to some other people also. But it was, and Kevin, you can probably speak to this also. But he feels very confident that the area that you spoke of, which is now not the front entrance, but used to be the front entrance, that area will work. And he shared with me that it's going to be monitored very closely. And the people at the Y are doing all kinds of things to make their business a place where people want to go. I mean, they are mowing the grass. They are trying to keep the property picked up and the trash picked up, and so they're doing all kinds of things to enhance that building and to also work with the neighborhood very closely. And he said, as a matter of fact, he said that I think our maintenance people had worked on that entrance to trim some of the bushes and the growth, the overgrown part there, and he said it looked really, really nice. And he also shared that the Y does use that playground that's there for their,
That's what I understood,
is
too.
it after-school care or day?
There's a summer camp going on now.
Summer.
Yeah, they've used it all summer.
And so anyway, he said to me, you know, I think it's fine that you're looking at other options, but we don't feel that it's absolutely critical right now, because we would really like to give it a try at this first and then go from there. Did I state that correctly, Kevin?
Yeah, yeah. The only thing I'd add, the playground, we've used that for the summer camp. We've used all the fields for summer camp and our other programs, but we have a drop-in childcare center so people can drop off their kids while they work out, and that goes year-round. They use that playground too, so when it comes time in the fall and school's out, what's really nice where our drop-in childcare center is and where it's right outside a window, so parents can come into a room to look out and see that their child is out on the playground being cared for and that. So it's nice having the playground there.
So moving that playground would not be a positive for the Y.
We'd be able to make it work because it's still on the grounds. It just wouldn't be.
Well,
I would like to see my 4-year-old outside with somebody and be able to physically see him.
we looked at a couple spots. This right there is the size of that playground. It's pretty good size. So we looked at maybe putting it across here, moving it down to here, and then another way was putting it right in here. But this right here is a swale. It's a concrete swale. All the water in this area goes down to here, and it follows right along there, out onto this street right here. It's interesting that if we moved it from here and moved it down in this location, that the new Wolverine company of Stride Right, where they are now, and I think Menards, they do this too. They have a shelter, like you have like a bus shelter, and they put that shelter out there, and that's where people smoke. And so if you did something like that, you could put that shelter right in here, and work it so that you can't see the back side of it, would be closed off from the public, but then they could smoke right in there. And what we were talking about just a little bit ago is right here. This is the front entrance, or was the front entrance at one time, and you can see two little dots on there, and those are actually concrete benches and tables where they could use this as a patio and go out there and even have their soft drinks and smoke right there. Then these are the steps leading out to the street. But then there is a sidewalk, it doesn't show, that comes along here into the parking lot, so that they could go this way, or when they come in and park, they want to smoke, they could walk around. And I think you do have an agreement where they can walk in this entrance and into the Excel Center.
Right. Yeah, I think the Excel Center, and we both see it as a positive for us to be able to better control the smokers. When they're off school ground, they can go do what they want, and they go to wherever they want to be. If we could control it by having them there, I think that the relationship that we have and the partnership that we've been able to establish in the last year, I think is good and strong enough that we'd be able to monitor the kids coming from inside the building using the Y exit to come back in. The thing that's natural with it is their office is right off that patio.
Right
There's a
there.
window that looks out onto the patio.
So you're saying that on the J Street side would be the preferable location?
Yeah, it makes the most sense to us. Just it's already got walls that block it off from view. The garden looks a lot better. It really was Mike Yount that was out there on Monday pulling weeds, and he did a good job. I'm going to see if he'll come to my house tomorrow. But yeah, it blocks off the street view, and it doesn't cost anything.
He's
which,
working.
is he working?
It was our concern. It was our concern that if the only access to this was around the side and here, that they wouldn't use it. They would still use their spot. There's 2 cans right there where they smoke. But with the access through the Y hallway into Excel, I think that would probably be the best spot.
Now, is that door, because Dave led me to believe that door is always locked,
It's always locked.
Yes.
but they can still come
There's a
in?
keypad. The thing that would be good, there's a window that looks out onto the patio that you can see from inside the office. And because they have scheduled smoke breaks, when they're doing it, they could have one of their staff people looking out, so when they're ready to come back in. That part of our agreement is that door remains closed. If that's where the smoke area is going to be, then the door would have to remain closed while they're smoking, so no smoke gets into the building.
You could set a soft drink machine out there and make some money off of
We could.
off the Cokes. But that now right here, there's a house that they're remodeling, I think this house is vacant, and then you have a house here and a house here. We did put the trash container right here on this spot. It was right in here, and that's opened up a couple more parking spots for us. And the city was okay with moving it there, and that's where it sits today.
Kelly. So will the Excel Center then be in charge of monitoring that? Or,
Yes, it'll be a joint effort. It's a lot like the parking lot is right now that we both do. What's great is Tyler Stewart he's a hawk. He's out there during the smoke breaks coming out telling students to get off of the parking lot, stay off school ground. And they do a really good job of doing that. So it would be the same, that we'd be able to see them from
and then the
where we're at.
cost on either one would probably be probably be less over on the is that J Street? J Street side? Wouldn't you, I mean, it's pretty,
Say that again.
the cost of doing this would
No
probably
cost to
There would
that
be no
one.
cost.
Yes, that's right.
If we did,
They would use the
we use the patio.
I think the great thing about that is it, like this week in his programs, they use this all the time, and then they also line up right in here, all of his summer programs for the Y in here. So this area here is heavily used, and then this area right here is used for T-ball
Yeah.
and soccer in this area. So by putting the smokers over there, there'll be no contact with anybody from the Y younger age children.
Right.
okay.
Suzanne?
I think our decision is whether we want to approve the limited waiver, right? I mean, as far as where it goes, I'm not sure why we're engaging so much in that conversation, and I sure am not interested in justifying spending that kind of money to accommodate something that's already not allowed, that we're have to waive a rule to make it happen in the first place. So I think we need to be considering doing as we said, which is making it giving it a sunset clause, clause, I guess is the word, trying it out, seeing it, let them make it work. I would have a difficult time justifying a $20,000 plus expenditure to accommodate people who are already doing something that isn't currently allowed on the property.
Well, I think that probably the reason we're having this conversation, it just seems like it is part of the whole deal. And because we are the ones who, in the end, get phone calls.
Agreed.
And so.
But I think a $20,000 expenditure would be a lot of phone calls.
I think the YMCA has received a couple phone calls.
We got a couple, but ours are better now. They like that we're mowing the grass. They like we're picking up trash. They like that we clean the windows. So we get good phone calls now. I'm trying to avoid the bad phone calls.
Jeff?
Well, I agree with Suzanne in the fact that we really got two issues. I myself, when you take a look at a waiver policy, I kind of have to know what the anticipated plan is before I can say yes or no to the waiver. So, but because I had met with Kevin last week, because my first initial thought was, if the playground was moved here, where this baseball diamond is, and then the backstop moved here, the Y is looking at potential increase in parking. Which means then, if they increase parking, they're gonna have to take this green space. So I think it was like $180,000 to $200,000 for them to do that. And I hated to see this green space go, when this could become the parking and they can retain this green space. So, which is really, since this is the entrance, I liked the idea, if the kids weren't here, then with them having two walls on this building already, the shelter type of construction here and here with some kind of cover could be done at a fairly reasonable expense, I would expect. The movement would be the major expense, but if it comes out to $20,000 or something like that, then I think it's also, I don't think we should spend the money. I think we're solving a problem for the Excel Center. I think if that was a direction I wouldn't feel guilty about contacting the Excel Center and saying, hey, you have a problem with smoking. You know what the rules are about smoking on school property. Therefore, maybe this $20,000 expense should become your expense. Now, to make the decision to move forward on a limited waiver and ask them to spend money, I think is also unfair, but for their behalf. But I think how we move forward, I think their school starts in a week. Is that right?
The 14th, yeah.
So I think we need to look at this as two issues. I think we need an immediate, at least this is how I see it, we need an immediate response to help solve the problem. I think the front, although it's probably not my favorite, is a solution for an immediate fix. If that doesn't work, then I think we need to have some kind of a idea as far as what our next plan is. So I'm okay with the waiver moving forward. The only thing that I would like is, with school starting up there, we'll know in 60 or 90 days whether it's going to work or not. So maybe the suggestion for the waiver should be moved back to December 31st of this year.
You mean the sunset clause?
Sunset clause. Because then that gives us a little latitude, and it gives us some authority to go back to the Excel Center and say, hey, look, we've tried. I don't know that the Y could fully understand the impact, because if you walk into that area, I mean, it's totally the Y's area. That area that those students have to walk through it's all the Y's area.
Right.
So I think we need to have some degree of protection for them as well. So if it doesn't work by December 31st, I think that's plenty of time for us to go to the Excel Center and say, look, option one didn't work, guys. Are you willing to spend $20,000 for option two? And then the limited waiver maybe kick in again. But the only reason why I was thinking of the playground going back down to the field, because the fence is already there, and it kind of protects the kids from going out onto the street. It gets away from the swell problem of the drainage, because we're above that. But I was just thinking long-term is when they decide to do something with their parking, and they do something with their parking, then we will have no green space there at all.
Who determines what working looks like? Like, how do we know if it works?
I guess that would be the Y in the
I think it
Excel
would
Center.
be, yeah.
And then if my only concern.
We'll know.
Yeah, we'll know.
Well, my only other concern is, if they start to filter down through onto the street, then that's going to be the same problem that we have now. The only difference is it's going to be on J Street versus 13th Street. Because even though that is kind of a nice area, there's only about a fourth of it that's under roof. So if you take a look on a cold day or a rainy day, if they got 10 people standing out there smoking under roof, then you don't have any room.
Well, they're standing out on the street right now.
So, right, I understand, but that was my only 2 cents was that I fully agree that we shouldn't spend any money because we're solving their problem, but I don't think that would prohibit us from asking the Excel Center to help fund whatever we need to do.
My recommendation on this would be to go with a waiver of the policy, see how it works. I'm a little hesitant to get behind any renovation of that area to promote a practice that is unhealthy to begin with.
That is also against the rules.
I don't mind getting behind how we use the facility in order to accommodate some of the habits that get in the way of learning. But I think we really need to think about the master plan of that area before we start redoing anything in a major way to accommodate smokers. So what Mr. Cross recommended last week certainly would give us the opportunity. As it's written, the sunset clause would be the end of the school year, and we can move that up to December. That's not a real problem. In fact, I think that's how he had it written to begin with, and it was our thought, let's make it the end of the school year so that there's no break in it. But having it at the end of December could create some nice conversation at that time on as to how we
Does that really
Get
give
that.
them enough time, do you think? Because you know how everything is, you put a system in place and then you have to tweak it, and that doesn't really give a lot of time.
Well, Kevin, what do you think?
I think it could. What I like having it to have the short term, 90 days. Either you use it or you lose it. If you don't make it work in these 90 days, then it's going to be gone. And by saying, I mean, December 31st, that's going to be kind of the natural winter break. Is that you have from the beginning of school to winter break to make this spot work. If not, literally you're out on the street. I think that it could be enough time.
Well, and then would it, I got you, Aaron. Would it be December 31st, and then would we reevaluate
I think it
after
would have-
that?
I think it would have to be before December 31st, because on December 31st, it dies.
It says the regular December 2014 meeting of the board, which is generally the middle of December.
Yeah,
So
so we'd take it up in December.
But if somehow things were working pretty well until December, I mean, obviously, there's going to be people that are going to be coming and going in that program. And so what then in February, let's say there's a big problem. Do we not have any recourse? Is it just, or?
Well, you could still say, I mean, let's say that it's working just fine and you need more time to think about it, you can always reinstitute a
Sunset
6-month
clause.
extend it to the
sunset
rest of
clause.
the year.
Okay.
Could do that.
And isn't the language also say that it was only going to go through this school year anyhow and have to be reviewed to be continued?
That's how it is right now.
Yes.
Well, I guess that's what I would like to see, that, the December 31st date in there, but then it be reviewed each year.
It reads like that.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, Aaron?
I do like the thought of shortening the time instead of May to December, because it puts the burden of compliance upon the people who are going to be affected by it. And that shorter time, it means from day one, they've got to hit the ground running with compliance. And that's not only just the location there on the patio, but restrictions from going down to the sidewalk or the curb area and doing that. Because the Excel Center and the YMCA can monitor that, I'll probably be monitoring J Street, as I drive by on a daily basis to see if and again, as I expressed at the other meeting, my concern has always been that congregation for that purpose on 13th Street. Even if we move it around to J Street, I want to make sure that we're not just moving a congregation for that purpose. But again, I would like the idea of J Street, but again, to make sure that they remain compliant in that short amount of time. Because 90 days can go by very quickly.
I think that's why it's important that we do some kind of action tonight, because with the students
Right.
coming back in a week, they can start day one.
I agree.
Okay, would you want to restate your recommendation?
I would
Dr. Borff?
recommend, sure, I would recommend the waiver of policy 7434 with a sunset provision causing this waiver to expire December 31st.
Okay, I need a motion, please.
So moved.
Motion made by Suzanne, seconded by Kelly. Questions, comments?
Just would like to say, I have I have problem supporting people who, allowing them to smoke. I just think that that's, while we're not the health police, I guess, I just think that, I just have a problem with that. And I like the fact that this has been set up with several different opportunities to review it and see how it's working. I also think if we're doing if this works and meets the needs of the Excel Center, we may need to actually look at something like this for our adult education center, because they have a similar problem that we have never addressed.
Dr. Borf, so would it be possible in the policy to state what Susie just said, that we do not condone this practice as a
I think that could be said with the resolution itself.
It's in there, isn't it? Doesn't it say?
Yeah, it is.
does it
I thought it already, it says whereas it's been found that the use of tobacco products in any form is
Okay.
harmful to human health and well-being.
okay.
Susie, I don't disagree with you. To me, the difference is, though, that this is a facility that we have leased to another entity that is not an RCS program. And I think that's the difference for me. While I do like the sunset clause, because we still are the owners, technically, of the facility, I think that's, to me, that's the difference between those two programs. It is not a Richmond Community Schools program currently. And that's
Well, I
kind of
guess
why
I see the reason that I'm willing to go forward is I see that this is a different clientele too. These are adults. These are people who have established habits, and
it's not an illegal
it's you know, it's not kids.
Aaron.
Personal feeling, and I agree with Susie. I know that it would be my preference that first whereas would also include, it has been found that the use of tobacco products in any form is harmful to human health and well-being, and the Board of Trustees of Richmond Community Schools does not condone the use of tobacco products. But that's my personal preference. I've never smoked. God willing, I never will, and I don't condone it. However, I know that this is not about being the smoke police necessarily. I would also hope that the Excel Center and the YMCA utilizes the opportunity, if we do go ahead and grant this waiver, to also do some education, or have something out there or whatever to educate them on the effects of tobacco and all.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
No.
Motion carried. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
And we move on with number 4.
Yes, we're ready for consent items now.
We have 2 items under consent, and I would recommend that the board approve the minutes as contained in this, as posted to the web. Also, recommendation from Human Resources, and there is an addendum also posted to the web that would accompany this recommendation. For those 2 items, then I would recommend approval for our consent agenda.
Okay. Motion made by Jeff Slifer, seconded by Aaron. Comments or questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Okay, we're ready for reports, discussion topics.
At our last board meeting, we talked briefly about the LIFT proposal. And the LIFT proposal was libraries inspiring our futures through technology. I wanted to simply talk about an update to that discussion, and the update is that we will be having a meeting with the mayor to talk to members of, a member or members of the Redevelopment Commission. Now, this is, the meeting date was established for this Friday, but as I understand, that has been rescheduled. So the rescheduled date will take place. I don't know that that'll happen before the next board meeting. It might. I'm not sure. But the good news is that members of the Redevelopment Commission and the mayor are giving this consideration. And as we said at the last meeting, this would involve, the proposal involves every single library in the system, and it would update these libraries for technology purposes to enhance technology as it relates to student instruction, teacher learning, but it would also reach out into the community and provide opportunities for members of our community to access the library in ways that libraries haven't been accessible in the past. It would provide opportunities for them to use technology for purposes of employment, searching for employment, or training for employment. So those are the issues that we brought to the board's attention the last time. We've taken it to the Redevelopment Commission, and as I said, there will be further conversation and discussion with members of the Redevelopment Commission and the mayor. It's good news.
Well, it's a good proposal, and would really be something that would, I think, a positive in our community, and working with our community, and giving lots of access to not just the people in the community, but our businesses. And so hopefully we will be able to move forward.
The next item is strategic plan development. And as we come away from the board having adopted the 3 goals, the members of the cabinet are right now working towards developing strategic action plans that are linked to the indicators of achievement concerning those goals. We aren't ready to present at this point. At the next meeting, we hope to be able to present, and that would be the essence of the strategic plan, upon which then the buildings would base and build their strategic plans for the year. So the nice feature of those 3 goals is that they are fairly encompassing, and there is no reason why we can't have a very comprehensive strategic plan well within those 3 goals. So there is momentum going on working towards those, but we're not ready yet.
Okay. We are anxiously awaiting.
I have no doubt. The next item has to do with budget assumptions. For the last 9 years, you've heard Bob Coddington talk about the assumptions. And this is a good strategy to inform the board as to how we build the budget that will be brought to you. And if you have any questions, I'm sure Mrs. Scalf will be able to answer those. But she's here tonight to review with you those basic assumptions upon which she will build her budget proposal.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hi.
I cannot promise riveting once again, but we'll take a look at it, and if you have questions, feel free to just ask and we'll go through it. So, as with every year, our budget assumptions are first and foremost to maximize our resources to increase our student achievement. That's the underlying premise under every budget that we ever write, is to maximize that student achievement. The other piece of it is, of course, disciplined spending and coming in with a balanced budget at the end of the year in 2015. So we'll go through each fund and we'll review the basic areas behind the revenue and the expenditure for each fund. And the transportation fund is where we'll start. That's the most levy-focused fund that we have. It is primarily funded through local property taxes, commercial vehicle excise tax, which we call CVET, financial institutions tax, which is FIT, and license excise tax, which comes at the same time as local property taxes. This year, the maximum levy increase, the DLGF released a growth factor of 2.7% across the state. So that's what I anticipate to look from a levy perspective over last year to this year. That is by statute limited at no more than 4%, so that's a little less than last year, but it's still growth. So after that, the estimated AV, for budget purposes, you always want to estimate your AV much lower than it's going to come in, and that's so that your tax rates can be set appropriately. So the estimated AV that I'm looking at for this year is $1,326,029,685. Where it will come in is usually $1,410,000 is where it came in this year. Hopefully that will grow, but for estimation purposes, we always go conservatively. Circuit breaker impact, because I am going to hope that we do not grow circuit breakers much more than this year. I've estimated them at $550,000. That's a little bit more than this year, but not a significant increase. We'll have to see what those come in at once the other units get their tax rates as well. Expenditures. This is the area where we have student transit under a base contract for 100% of our levy, and that is before circuit breakers. So I'm estimating our levy based on that 2.7% growth factor of $2,508,000. With the circuit breakers out, that will leave us a net levy of actual 100% collection amount of $1,958,000. This does include field trip routes of around $100,000 district-wide. We also pay for midday and additional routes each year, and that's approximately $120,000. We have salary and benefits of around $40,000 each year in the transportation fund. Some of that difference between the 1958 and the 2508 is made up in those other areas of funding like CVET, FIT, and excise tax, but it does not bring the whole amount of the levy back. So we will be in a need to use cash balance next year if the contract remains the same.
Could you remind me how long that contract is for?
Right now, I believe we have 2015. We need to redo the contract. So that's something we'll be looking at in the very near future.
So are there sometimes possibilities of reopening contracts? I mean, is that a possibility?
Mr. Cross has recommended that we do that on this particular contract.
Right. We are going to look at that.
Okay. Thank you.
The bus replacement fund, we have the primary funding sources, the same as the transportation. Our bus replacement plan is 12 years. The estimated AV will be the same across the board in each of these funds, so you'll notice no change there. Circuit breaker impact, I'm estimating at around $160,000, which is close to what we lost this year, which was $148,000. So next year's planned replacement is 1 E-bus and 2 D-buses. And we had 2 slated on the original plan. This year, due to the circuit breaker, we had to put 1 aside, and we have added that to next year for replacement to get back on the plan. Rainy day fund, no changes. Board approves everything that we do, but I do not expect new revenue at this time. Debt service fund, primary funding, it remains the same. Estimated AV the same. Interfund loan will be required to make the payments next year at the time in which they're due. It will be repaid in December. The expenditure schedule is on the right-hand side. We have payments due in June and December, and the bonds will be paid in full December 31st of 2019. Pension bond, almost identical revenue and expenditure schedule. You can see those payments are just in January and July rather than June and December, and the bonds will be paid in full January 5th of 2020. Capital projects. The revenue remains the same as each of the other taxing funds. The estimated AV remains the same. But in capital projects, we have what we call levy neutrality, and that is the amount that we pay in the pension bond has to be taken out of the CPF fund original levy balance with the DLGF. So that's what that term means, and that's why I have to include it in my revenue, because even though it's not really revenue, it's a piece of my portion of the CPF budget that I have to show. Utilities and insurance provision allow for $1,384,393. I think that will probably remain the same. The DLGF will give me that final number when we get the budget. And circuit breaker impact, I'm estimating, will be the same, $750,000. The expenditures, as always, facility improvement costs will not exceed the revenue that we receive. Board direction and approval will be required for renovations negatively affecting the CPF cash balance, so that's no change to any other year. And I do estimate the cash plan for spending next year at $2,700,000, which is around where we're at this year. And if circuit breaker impact is less, that means that that cash plan will go up. But for conservative purposes, we're going to estimate low. General fund. These are our revenue sources. We have our state basic grant that provides us tuition support, special education, vocational education, honors diploma, special education preschool, and full day kindergarten based on our student count. Our other funding sources are the adult education grant, summer school grant, indirect costs from Title I, Title II, food services, and some other grants that we can take indirect costs from. Interest income when it exists. We don't have too much of that these days, but it does help a little. And transfer tuition. Expenditures, I look to see staffing at no change from last year. Salaries no longer include the increment, so that's not anything different for this year. Certified staff are budgeted based on need at the buildings. All new staff, certified or classified, must be approved by the superintendent. So this is no change. Benefits, we do see some changes in 15 with benefits. Our costs as a corporation will increase based on employee eligibility, and that will bring us into compliance with the Affordable Care Act as we move forward into future years. Services, utility cost increases, I'm estimating to be up over 14 by about 4%. Workers' compensation insurance will most likely increase by around 5% over 2014. And partial funding of staff development will continue from Title I and Title II as we've been doing. And there will be some general fund staff development dollars available and distributed by building. Supplies, materials, capital outlay. The allocations are based on student population in the buildings and by programming at each individual building. And then other areas, reserve accounts are created for adjustments and necessary expenditures above the building level to ensure that the adequate resources are reaching our kids. And the ultimate goal in our budget is to expend only the amount of revenue that we receive and result in a balanced budget. Any questions?
Could you go back the slide before the last slide? Could you explain the reserve accounts a little bit?
At each level of programming, and by that I mean elementary, intermediate, and high school, we establish reserve accounts, and those reserve accounts are only available to me, the superintendent, and you as needed. And those are accounts that are established for the purpose of the budget is required to be broken down by subsections, and subsections are based on buildings. So when there are buildings that require special things, when we opened the Hibbard building as a prime example, we did not realize when we wrote the budget 18 months prior that we were going to reopen a building. So we didn't have any allotments set for that building. Those reserve accounts allowed us the area to have the dollars to move into that building. So that's what those are for.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Karen. It was very riveting. Okay, we are now ready for our action items.
The first action item tonight is a formal receipt of the Wayne County grant that has been, I shouldn't say Wayne County grant, it's the Wayne County Foundation grant for new equipment for a photography class at Richmond High School. This was in the amount of, I think, $2,500, and it was a grant written by Jeff Gabbard over there, the new teacher in journalism, and he pursued this. It was funded, and it takes a formal receipt from the board to make that happen.
Good for him. Okay, do I have a motion? Motion made by Susie Hively, seconded by Aaron Stevens. Comments or questions? Well, I think that's great that he took the initiative to seek out some additional funds. Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried.
To present the next request, I turn to Mr. Millis.
We would like to partner again with the Cope Environmental Center for 2 field trips and 2 outreach programs. It's $8.50 a student. We've done this over the last 2 years. It's worked out very well. In fact, during summer school on Fridays, they actually came out and we went there a couple of times and they did that for us. So kids are always excited to see the Cope environmental people, and Aubrey Blue and Allison Zaptel have been excellent in working with us, so I'd make that proposal again.
Okay, I need a motion. Motion made by Jeff Slifer, seconded by Dixie Robinson. Comments or questions? Susie.
I just think it's a very exciting program, and I love that we are fortunate enough to have a group in our community who can provide us with these additional opportunities, I guess, is for the kids, because it really is fun to see when they're in action.
Absolutely. Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried.
Next item, 6.03, it would be handbook approvals, and we turn to Misty Hollis for presentation of that request.
Thank you. Each year we bring to you the school district student handbook for approval. As you probably noticed, the majority of the changes were up front related to all of the work that you have done as a board, reflecting the vision and the mission statements in your board beliefs and statements, leadership values as well. I have noticed a change on page 5 that I need to make to Dr. Borf's letter. It should say June 2014, so it asks, make you aware that that needs to be changed. That does not reflect that change. So I would make a recommendation that this be approved by you.
Okay. Motion?
So moved.
Motion made by Aaron Stevens, seconded by Susie Hively. Comments or questions? Dixie.
I had a question on page 21 of the handbook.
Okay.
Just because I just went to the Summer Board Academy and they were going over policy, changing of policies pertinent to 2014 Indiana General Assembly changes in law, and had to do with firearms. And our policy, our board policy, as well as what's in the handbook, does that match with what's been passed?
The legislation, I actually sought out advice from the Department of Education and their legal department related to that. And that information we did receive is more related to our employees. And so we need to address that in our employee handbook. I mean, we know that. We've talked about that. You'll notice that there was a section of this stricken that will match what reflects the state law. But we still have the right to have policies set in place as far as
For
what
the students. For the students.
Very, I mean,
Mhm.
that's what this reflects as for our students.
Okay.
Thank you for asking, though. You're right.
Well, it's not that I agree with the law.
I understand.
But,
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Now we're ready for our second public commentary. Anyone from our crowded public wishing to speak tonight? Seeing none, we will move on to board reports, old business. Jeff.
The board members would have received an email from me, I think late last week, talking about the creation and the start of a finance committee that we've been talking about. Mrs. Scalf and I met Monday to have a discussion on what, I thought a good start would be, what is the expectation of the finance committee? What did the administration want? What did we want? And that's what Karen and I spent some time talking about it. I quickly come to the conclusion that there's a lot more questions when you start thinking about it that can be created. So I had hoped to have some formal recommendations or formal thoughts that for the board to consider, but I'm not quite at that point yet. But what I would like to do, as this is developed, I've gotten input from some of the board members, and I've had conversations with Dr. Borf, and what I'd like to do is, I think how this moves forward, I think it's not going to be something that can be defined very quickly. I think it's going to have to be developed to kind of see what the roles are of the Finance Committee, because one of the things that I want to make sure of is I want to make sure that we're not looking over the shoulder of the administration and stopping them from doing their job. I want to make sure that we help them do their job. And how that takes place has been more confusing as I've gotten involved with it. So I guess what I'd like to propose that we do is I'd like to get the ball started or rolling. I'd like to get started with it, and I would like one of the questions that Karen and I discussed is initially how large should the committee be. It's hard for a committee to be functional if it's got 14 or 15 or 20 people on it. We've kind of settled, I think, based on the answer of the other board members, that we were looking at somewhere between 5 and 7 people. So I think what I'd like to do is get started with what our original concept was. Originally, the discussion of the Finance Committee came up because we wanted to talk about contracts. We wanted to review contracts. We wanted to create some similar processes when we deal with contracts. And we have 2 or 3 different contracts that we really need to get on fairly soon. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to go ahead and get some kind of a consensus from the board tonight that we can move forward with the idea that we are just working on contracts and looking at contracts, and then as time goes along, kind of develop some of the other responsibilities of what this Finance Committee will be. One of the questions that I asked Karen that I've kind of struggled with is the role of the Finance Committee in relation to the board. Is that I'm really very adamant in the fact that I don't want the Finance Committee to take away any action that the board should take as a whole. So if there are 7 board members on it, then it becomes an easy decision because the Finance Committee could act with a little bit more authority. But if there's only 2 board members on it, then I don't think it's fair that the Finance Committee limits anything coming from coming to the board. So the question that I asked was, will the members of this standing committee have voting rights? What if something is voted on, 2 to 3 in approval or 2 to 3 against? Or I still think whatever that recommendation is, I still think it should go to the board And I don't want to see, I can't imagine as a board that a report comes from a finance committee without some form of recommendation. So if you're looking at a finance committee and ask them what their opinion is on an issue that's brought to the board, they've got to form some type of an opinion. So how do we form that opinion? And then not take the authority away from the board as a whole. So with that, I guess, unless there's been some change, the only two board members that I know that want to be involved in the committee, that I've been told that want to be involved in the committee, are, of course, one is me because co-chairing with Karen, but the other is Linda. Did any other board member want to be a part of the standing committee? Because you're able to come to any meeting. It's an open meeting. But I think there needs to be.
I didn't quite understand what you were saying about the coming to a recommendation if it's 3-2.
Well, my thought was I don't want the finance committee to limit anything going to the board for full
Exactly.
consideration.
Right.
Regardless of how the finance committee feels it should move forward. So that's why when we were trying to look at the membership of the committee, choosing the numbers is kind of dependent on how many board members want to be a member of the standing committee.
Did you get my email, Jeff?
No, I did not.
I had said that I would participate, understanding that if we talk contracts, I'm not in a position to negotiate a student transit contract, but.
Okay. And
I might be interested in participating, depending on what kind of numbers we decide need to be there. But if I'm thinking about what I want to hear from a financial committee, I think rather than hearing that the financial committee voted 2-3 or 1 to whatever the numbers might be, I would prefer to hear the pluses and deltas that are represented in that contract, and
I agree with
that's
that.
what I'm trusting the financial committee to come to and saying, well, here's the things about this contract that we think are working for us, and here's where our concerns are.
Absolutely.
And that's what would inform our discussion and our vote here at the board.
That was.
I agree with that. I probably used the wrong term when I said voting, but I was thinking more of an opinion coming. There needs to be some kind of an opinion if
Right.
you're asked.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say, is that any vote within this committee would be a vote on a recommendation to the board only. It wouldn't be a vote.
I wouldn't even
wouldn't
want it
even
to be a
vote.
vote on a recommendation to the board.
Okay.
One of the terms that Jeff and I used in our meeting was to take away the word recommendation and make it a financial review or a financial report for you. That simplifies what was discussed during the financial committee meeting, almost in minute form, but to provide you more information on the topics at hand. That it wouldn't necessarily be what we deem a recommendation,
Right.
but it would be
Okay.
a review of the topics.
I could
That
even
makes sense.
I could even see a situation where having someone explain the history of a contract, or what maybe even as basic as what it's all about, because some of these contracts are fairly arcane may be the wrong word, but they're kind of out of my field of expertise for sure, and I sometimes just need a little background information.
Well, and our recommendations come from our superintendent. And certainly, I look at the finance committee as being an informational type of committee. And certainly, there might be some possibilities for recommendations that Dr. Borff will decide that needs to be made to the board. And that committee will do a lot of the information finding and so forth. But at least that's kind of what my perception is.
Well, I think from the sounds of it, I think we're all in the same agreement. I should not have used the word voting. That's our recommendation. I just want to make sure that we don't take any power away from the administration from doing their job, and I don't want the finance committee to limit anything from going to the full board. That's my main goal. And I think we need to get moving on the contract review, because we've been talking about the contract review for quite some time now. So I was going to propose that we move forward with, I'd like to, with Karen and I being on it co-chairing, then I'd like to propose that Dr. Borf be an ex officio member, that if any recommendation comes out of the finance committee, or any opinion, I should say, that his opinion would be reserved for what his recommendation for or against is to the board. Then Linda, which has said that she's wanted to be on the committee, Suzanne, and us start to move forward with that.
And if four's too many, I'm happy to back out. I just wanted to make sure there were at least three solid, consistent members, because I think that's important. And then, like you said, the rest of us can come in and out if there's a topic that's of specific interest, or if you think that there needs to be more conversation. But I think it's very important that there's a core of people that are the same consistently.
I think we all agree with that.
Yeah.
If you're interested, then
I think that, actually, I think 3 is a really good number, and I'm happy to have you guys do it.
well, my only thought is probably I know there's I'm just going to, there's 2 contracts I know that are on the table right now that we need to take a look at. So one of them would probably.
And one of them is one that I need to not be involved in.
Well, perhaps I could be, since maybe I could be Suzanne's backup if there's a contract coming up that she feels uncomfortable, or has a conflict of interest. I'd be happy to sit in her stead.
So initially, then we would start off with you, and then see how it develops. Because
I have the marketing committee, so I'm not necessarily looking for another job.
well,
I
I'm
just
not.
wanted to be sure
I'm not trying to bypass. I don't want to limit anybody.
No,
I mean,
I
because
understand.
at any given time, these are open meetings.
Absolutely.
These are board meetings. Anybody is welcome to attend. But I think one of the things that Karen and I had discussed was, if once we start in on a process, we may have to have quick meetings twice a week. I mean, we have to make sure we have time to notify the public, but we may need to move through business hours rather quickly with meetings. And with that, the larger the committee, the more difficult it's going to be to get the consistent core there.
That's right.
So, is it okay for Karen and I to go ahead and meet and maybe start to plan an agenda and information, and then we contact you guys?
I think that would be
I'd
great.
say that would be great.
Get a meeting
Anything you want to add,
scheduled
Karen?
I have lots of work for you.
Anything you would like to add, Dr. Bohr?
Well, I would like to say, I would like to charge the two of you with at least creating a conversation on a regular schedule. Because if this is something that is open to the public, it would just be easiest to put a schedule out there and publish that and make sure it's everyone knows that it's posted and open and advertised. It's easily done if we have a regular schedule.
Well, and we're okay with that, but I just wanted people to understand too that there may be needs that we may need to expedite that schedule in some cases.
Absolutely, but the open door law has to be followed, and
right.
So we'll try to move within that schedule as much as possible. Just keep in mind, you have a certain number of hours that have to be adhered to if you're going to have a quick meeting.
Well, I'm sure.
Unless there's an emergency.
I'm sure that you guys will keep us on task for that.
I'll work on that.
Good. All right. Thank you.
Okay, anything else? This really isn't a report, or really is, it's kind of thinking about our upcoming school year. I'm sure that plans are hastily being made for the opening of school because it's less than a month.
We have a number of staff positions we're working on. We're interviewing right now for the Vail principalship. We're awaiting a decision by Ivy Tech on a president position, because I think we're all honored to know that one of our employees is being considered as a finalist for that position, Chad Bolzer. That would create some changes within the high school, but we continue to receive, we received a retirement notice today, or
Resignation.
a resignation today?
It was on the board, it was on the addendum.
Okay. So staff changes are being made. We also have the letters. We're preparing the letters to go out to students, to teachers. The preparations are well underway.
Well, so let me ask, because Richmond Community Schools is obviously the best choice. And why is that?
What's the only choice? It's the only choice. And for those of you who may have had an opportunity to look at our State of the Schools report last week, we went through and discussed so many of the stories behind the numbers that need to be told. We talked about some of the different students. We just last week we had a student who placed, was it second? Second at nationals in Skill USA. And we talked about why that kind of thing happens. In the picture that we presented of that student was also his teacher. Relationships are so important, and we focus on the relationships as we talk about the stories. The teachers focus on relationships. I thought it was interesting during our interviews yesterday with principal candidates for Vail, the teachers focused on relationship building, and not just relationships with them, but they said the principal needs to be understood that the principal needs to have a strong relationship with parents and students. I think it's indicative of what we've created here. We are trying to be more responsive. Every year we try to enhance that responsiveness that we have, that receptivity.
Well, it's one of our beliefs now.
It is part of the beliefs. In fact, that's the number one. So for that and for various reasons, check our website. You'll see all kinds of reasons why Richmond is the only choice if you are a discriminating parent looking for the best educational options.
Well, the State of the District report was, I thought, very well received. And about how many people do you think we had in attendance?
We had a little over, right at 50. I think it was right at 50.
Well, maybe might have to move it to a larger site next year.
Might have to.
So, okay, great. Okay, moving on.
The upcoming meeting, if you recall, this month is operations. So our upcoming meeting next time will focus on maintenance and transportation. We will also have some personnel items. We'll have some important appointments to make at the next meeting. We will have the budget review at the next meeting, and some significant changes with regard to the school year. If we have those to announce, I mean, we will be right there at the beginning of the school year. So those are items on the next agenda.
Okay, we're ready for our press conference. Anyone from the press? Nope. And so now we're ready for our work session with Maggie LaRue.
I'd like to preface this by saying that Maggie has spent a lot of time in this room today. She came up for board practice, and we had a long conversation about different things coming up, and she sat through this one. So I appreciate her willingness to prepare for this. But the work session will include both a report from food services and also a hands-on, which will be
we're looking forward to that.
some items. So.
Good evening. What you're going to be sampling are, they're called benefit bars. We're hoping that they will replace the Pop-Tarts. They have less carbs. I think they have a better flavor. You'll also be sampling some Fruitable Plus. And there's two kinds of Fruitables. There's one Fruitable where there's more fruit than vegetable, so it's considered a fruit. You're going to be sampling the one that has more vegetable in it, so it's considered a vegetable.
I like fruits better than vegetables.
And you're going to love them.
So are these items new this year?
We
Or-
are using the Fruitable Plus. The benefit bar is new.
Okay, okay.
Have these been sampled by students yet?
No.
These have not gone.
The rep
okay.
came about 3 weeks ago, and I told her I needed something for the school board meeting, so she made a special trip on the way to a food show in Cleveland and dropped them off.
I see. All right.
So we get to do it.
So do we-
Counts as a vegetable?
Is there a drum roll, or do we just open them up, or?
Oh, please open them up. Because if you're busy eating, I can get through this very quickly. Thank you. So it's time for our food service report for 2013-14. We support our school community with meals. We give for welcome back at schools, literacy nights, kindergarten rocks, and carnival events. We supply snacks, water, and juices for our nurses, stations, for ISTEP, for our blood drive at the high school. We supply hot dogs and buns for a homecoming parade get-together. We have healthy snacks in our RHS open house gift bags. We also do student incentives with healthy foods. This year we got saucy because the strips of fire, at one time they were the students' favorite, but they would not change their ingredients to whole grain, so we had to drop the strips of fire. So knowing that a lot of our products, they all come from the same company, we can't really change their flavor profile, so we thought we would get a little saucy and came up with some interesting things, like we mix ranch and hot sauce. We come up with a Cajun ranch sauce, which the kids really like, honey mustard sauce. So we have several different flavors every Wednesday whenever we have the chicken bites, and they can choose whatever sauce they like. We also, as you can see, between breakfast lunches, after-school snacks, and our fresh fruit and vegetable program, we had 1,212,347 meals and snacks we served this year.
Unbelievable.
Just unbelievable.
And I don't know if anyone knows our meal pattern requirements. At the elementary and the intermediate schools, and this is accumulative over the week, but they want 2 ounces of protein per day, 1 to 2 servings of bread, 3/4 of a cup of vegetable, a half a cup of fruit, and 8 ounces of milk. Now in this, we also have to have a half a cup of legumes, a half a cup of a starchy vegetable, a half a cup of a dark green vegetable, and 3/4 of a cup of a red or orange vegetable. And we can only have juice twice a week. And then when we move to the high school, the difference in the patterns is we have to give them one whole cup of vegetable and a whole cup of fruit every day. And they did change the requirements. We no longer have limits on protein and breads as long as we stay within our calorie requirements.
And what was the calorie?
Let me see. I think 650 at the elementary and the intermediate, 850 at the high school, and that's for lunch. For breakfast, I'm thinking 550 at the elementary, and I'm thinking 600, around 600 at the high school.
So not very much.
No, and at the high school next year, or at all the schools, we have to add another half a cup of fruit for breakfast, but they haven't given us any extra calories. So that's sort of been a challenge.
What about the sodium? When do your changes need to take place for that?
Next year.
And what's the sodium count that? Oh,
Well, I brought these as a little demonstration. This is a tablespoon. This is 1/4 of a teaspoon. That's 590 milligrams of salt. I'm only allowed 540 for an elementary breakfast. I can't even give them this much salt.
Oh, my goodness.
So that's why we could only serve white milk for breakfast, because the chocolate and the flavored milks all have a lot more sodium in them. And then at the high school, at lunch, they've given us extra, but we now also have to include all the condiments. So when we give them a packet of mustard or mayonnaise or ranch, that all has to be included in the calories and the sodium.
And there are sodium. There's sodium.
Yes,
in
there
hot
is.
Actually, this is pretty good.
Pretty high in carbs.
Well, that's what I
So
asked
the
the
new
question.
regulations are not only for the meals, they're also for our a la carte line and for vending and for school classroom celebrations, for fundraisers. All that is included in this now. So our new a la carte, if it is a bread, it must be a whole grain. We have to watch the calories, the sugar, and the saturated fats. The great thing is the DOE has given us a calculator. And if they want to do a fundraiser, they just put in the serving size, how many calories, how much fat. It will tell you, yes, it's compliant, no, it's not. So it's a really easy calculator to use.
They're getting in on the fundraising too. That's what we're saying. That's what-
You do get some exceptions,
Suzanne?
but you have to ask for the exceptions.
If the students are doing a fundraiser, they have to also meet the, so pizza kits and butter braids and all that stuff, is that what you're talking about?
The pizza kit, yes. The butter braid,
If
yes.
it's during the day.
If it's during the day, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, good.
But that's also
Like,
from
are you kidding me?
midnight until 3:30 the following afternoon. They consider that a school day.
So basically, they're going to midnight.
So from 3:30 to midnight,
Midnight of the night before until 3:30 in the afternoon. After 3:30 in the afternoon until midnight that night, it's whatever you
As
want.
long as they sell between 3:30 and midnight, it's okay.
It's okay.
Prove it, is what I think.
I
Goodness.
see any kids going door to door at midnight or 11:30.
This picture here is sort of misleading. There's a big hole in the wall. We paid for a cold pass-through, and it came in an interesting shape and had to go back to the company and be rebuilt. So we still have a hole. We hope to have it filled by the time school starts. So this is some of the equipment we've purchased this year. We helped to purchase K-Time. We purchased a freezer for Dennis, 2 cafeteria tables for Crestdale, and odds and ends, daily use for the central kitchen.
Maggie, I have a request.
Yes.
When that piece of equipment comes in, would you send a photo of that?
Absolutely.
So that we can put a before and after, and the board can see how that, because that looks, I mean, if you didn't tell us that that was empty because of a piece of equipment that had to be rebuilt, that would look like it was meant to be there. Looks very nice.
Everybody loves it. But we need the equipment more.
Sure.
So at the beginning of this year, we started off with $959,517. Our revenue was $2,853,001. Our expenditures was $2,914,696. So our ending balance is $897,822. Since we have a healthy balance, we recommend that meal prices remain the same for another year.
Question.
Yes.
Okay, so at the end of the year, the ending balance, it's shy $60,000.
Yes.
But you want to keep the prices the same.
Yes.
And I can understand your reasoning why, but for the viewing audience, could you explain why? Why it's prudent?
Well, the state says that the most that we can ever have is 3 months operating balance, and this is close to that 3 months operating balance. I don't know if they feel because if you have more than that, then they're giving us too much money. I'm not sure. But since we do have a healthy balance,
We're
our
able,
community's safe.
even with the expenditures outweighing the revenues, we are still giving a very good meal. As a matter of fact, 1,200,000 good meals, and keeping the prices the same, not looking to pad our pockets at the expense of the families that we're serving. I just want to point out the fact that, you say it's the only choice. One of those things, again, putting first families, we are saving them money by giving them something, even at an expense to your account. And I want the public to know that.
A lot of our vendors recommend, such as if they bring in a bottle of apple juice, they'll say, well, you can charge 3 times what we charge you. If we charge a quarter, we're tickled to get a quarter. We don't do it for the money.
Good.
No.
I just want to point out, too, one thing to note, when you're looking at a budget, there are timing issues that can happen from year to year. So even though the revenue might look smaller, it could be that that reimbursement came in a week later than it did the year before, or this year we got it a week earlier than the year before. So there are some things in timing that we don't expect or we don't necessarily plan for that just happen. So this is within reason of a normal.
And all the food for the summer feeding was purchased in May. We won't see the money until the end of September, October.
And some deficit spending is based on one-time, non-recurring expenditures. So that, too, has to be factored into it. I mean, we can draw down that cash balance in a very intentional way through single expenditures.
So we're looking forward to next year. We have redesigned our menus. We were asked by several of our head cooks that although we had a lot of interesting things on the menu, they were harder to read because the printing was so small. So now we have taken off all the extras and just expanded it so that it's a lot easier for the children to read. We're also going to put up in the corner every building and their mascot. We are purchasing vent hoods for Westview, Elizabeth Star, and Vale. I don't know if anybody's ever visited these schools when the oven's on. Sometimes it's over 100 degrees in the kitchen. So we are adding these vent hoods to help our employees. We're also thinking of and hoping to work on a new media system at the high school to take down the smaller televisions and put in big 60-inch screens that we can have constant changes, what's going on in the school system, celebrate so many things that way. And we're going to update our last walk-in cooler. I got that this morning. It's not a walk-in cooler, it's our walk-in cooler.
Walking in.
I know, I still have a little extra in there. Now we'll talk about our fresh fruit and vegetable program. We did have 4 schools apply. 3 were accepted, Vale, Fairview, and Elizabeth Star, but we will support the other 3 through food service monies. This year we had a really cool new fruit that we were able to try out, which was a lemon plum. Remember that one, Aaron?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. Can't wait.
I purchased some and took some down to the police department, and he wasn't able to warn the chief before he bit into it. And every child says it is like biting into a waterfall. It tastes like nectar. It was beyond anything anyone had ever eaten before. There's only a 3 to 4 week time when they're available. So hopefully next year when we're able to get the lemon plums.
Is that in February, if I recall?
Lemon plum.
You've got to try it. You've got to try it. I mean, it's biting into heaven.
But you need a bib and napkins when you try one.
You can quote me on that.
And I want to say thank you. We've had a very easy transition when Rob has taken over. He's been super. Jim Magoski helped me to design our web page. It was an interesting experience. We want to thank Glenn Slifer. He always helps with research into our equipment and our power needs. John Hamilton helps save us money with great ideas. So it's a good team. Do you have any questions?
This benefit bar would be for breakfast?
Yes.
I don't have a question, but I have a comment. And I want to go back to something that you said that I think is very important and very telling about about you and the food service department. And it goes to saying what we were talking about a little bit ago about relationships, when you said that every day is a new day. And every day you start over, even if there has been some misbehaving or some things that need to be corrected. You always go in the next day with a fresh start, and I think that is commendable, and thank you for helping to form those relationships with our students.
Thank you.
And please thank your food service people that do that each day.
Absolutely. Any other questions?
I'd like to acknowledge the Food Services Department for doing the breakfast last week for our State of the Schools report. And not only did they put on the breakfast and provide the food, but they also color-coded or color-coordinated the napkins, and I think, tell the story on that one, Maggie.
I asked Dr. Borf if he had ever been harangued by an employee. My kitchen manager, we had black, red, dark green napkins. No, that was not good enough. I had to go out to Party City and purchase light green napkins to go with the plates so she could wrap the silverware. And I told him, I said, I'm not going to charge him for them because this is such a good story. I don't want to ruin a good story. But she does that to me a lot. It's not the exact color. I have to go shopping. So
I appreciate the detail that went into that preparation.
I noticed that touch. It was very, very nice.
Yes, it was.
Well, and you always prepare, I didn't notice that on your slide, but you always prepare special treats for our employees at the beginning of the school year.
Yes.
And it's always done in some creative way.
Yes. See?
That's the main thing.
I want to do a pirate theme. We're going to have patches with the R. All we're going to say is R for Richmond. But I want to put a bag of bones on the food table, and he said no.
R. I love it.
So I'm going to put it on the gift table. So there.
Always brings
Easy
a laugh.
transition.
Well, some of us notice that creativity.
Thank you, dear. That's very nice.
And if it's not there, we'll know why.
There you go.
We're gonna have a big bag.
That's enough, Rob.
Treasure chest stuff with gold coins.
Thank you, Maggie.
Thank you.
Next week, we have our Tech Expo, and it's going to be a 2-day event. We're going to have breakfast and lunch, and Maggie's department's going to take ownership of that. We did it last year through them as well, and we had a lot of compliments from the
Are you
last
going
2
to be
years
creative, Maggie, next week?
for our Tech Expo. So I think she's going to be on vacation, but her manager's going to take care of things. But
Sheila Elliott, the lady that was speaking
Right.
at the beginning of the film, yes, she's going to take very good care.
we got a lot of compliments last year and the year before, and that's a lot of school districts around the state. So and so that's a hard crowd to please, but they were very pleased. Thank you, Maggie.
Do you
Thank
still
you.
have available seats at the Tech Expo?
Yes,
Okay, I was hesitating because I didn't.
July
wanna-
15th and July 15th and 16th. So
Okay, because I didn't want to take a seat away from somebody.
no,
Okay.
thank you.
All right, well, good luck to you. We'll be anxious to hear how it went.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else for the good of the cause?
I do have something I'd like to have recorded here, and that is immediately after our meeting, we have an executive session. And that executive session is dedicated to the evaluation process of the superintendent. Every school district goes through a similar process, thanks to some legislation that went into place a few years ago. But it's an important process, and the process we use is one that was developed by the Indiana School Boards Association and the Indiana Association of Public School Superintendents. That's the process that we use, and the board is engaged tonight in conversation with me as I talk about the self-evaluation, and this is a multi-week process. This really isn't even the beginning of the process. We're just into the thick of it. So I want everyone to know who's watching this board meeting that this happens. This happens every year.
So we're going to be working after the board meeting.
There you go.
And we got calories, so we can move
That's right.
forward.
Okay, with that said, we are adjourned.